Hi, I'm Linda Thompson and welcome to the Author's Show. Today we're taking a trip back in time to the mystical, magical country of Ireland. We have Michele Venne with us today, the author of Gifts and the Goddess. Welcome to the show, Michele.
Thank you.
Well, tell me a little bit about Of Gifts and Goddess.
Well, it's a fictional romance set in historical Ireland. It has to do with some warring clans. The heroine actually has a gift of clairvoyance, and that's how she's able to keep herself safe wandering the hillsides of Ireland. The book really asks the reader to do more things than to just, dive into fiction and escape for a little while and be entertained by what I think is a pretty good story. At the end, there are some questions that I've asked the reader to ponder that delve into spirituality and nature and that kind of thing, because it kind of goes along with really Anne's spirituality and how she is throughout the whole book.
What a great concept. You don't very often find historical novels, fiction novels, written with the intent in mind to make the reader think. Well, you say historical fiction, so how far back in time are we going?
Somewhere between 1100 and 1750. I wanted it with castles and swords and horses, but then some things, I didn't want the food to be too far-fetched, or some of the way that they spoke, or some of the living arrangements that they had and things like that. So I kind of had to move the time frame up a little bit. I didn't want to be too far away from the readers that they couldn't relate to the characters.
Are we going back into the period of time where there were clans in Ireland?
Yes. Yes. Actually, technically at 1607 was the flight of the Earls. All the clans were tired of England invading them, and the clan leader said, okay, we're going to get on a boat, we're going to go to Spain, we're going to get Spain to help us out, kick England out for good. Through a storm, they missed Spain, ended up in Rome, and they never came back to Ireland. So after that, without really any clan leaders, some of the clans did kind of survive, but it just opened the door for England. Without that firm foundation of those leaders, it opened the door for England to come in and really start putting the hammer down and saying, okay, we're going to take control, and you guys aren't going to be allowed to do what you've been doing for a while. Are
there still clans there?
Their family names are very much adhered to in Ireland, and actually there are several registries on the internet and lots of genealogy books. If you have an Irish name, O'Connor or Mara or whatever, that you can trace your roots all the way back to Ireland in a specific town or specific county in Ireland.
What got you interested in writing about Ireland?
Probably about 20 years ago, I had visited Ireland and loved it. Of course, I think that there's not a single person that's ever been to Ireland that doesn't love it. And just the castles and the horses, and I have a horse of my own, so I was always interested in, what horses have done through us for the ages, being, beasts of burden and carrying us into war, and companions and that kind of thing. And maybe that's when the seed was planted, was when I was back there that 20 years ago. But the story just kind of kept poking at me, and I kept hearing conversations and seeing the characters and that kind of thing. So had to put pen to paper. That's
great. Your cover takes me back in time. It's an old castle. Is that an actual photograph that maybe you took 20 years ago?
I wish. No, it is an actual photograph, but it's not one that I took.
Well, do you know what castle it is?
I don't.
It's just a delightful picture that kind of takes you back in time before you even open the book, and it makes you want to think about more. So tell me a little bit more about Anne.
Anne has survived the slaughter of her village from another clan who had been supporting them because they live in an area where a lot of things don't grow, and they've had some bad leadership in her clan. So her and 6 others were able to survive the battle, and so she kind of leads them, tries to keep them together, keep them safe, and for about 5 years they kind of wander around and living with various clans before she's finally captured by Duncan O'Connor, who is the clan that came in and wiped them out in their village. And she has the gift of clairvoyance, and that is what she uses to protect herself and to protect her 6 remaining members of the McCleary clan.
Well, do they get together in a romantic sense?
Yes, they do.
That's kind of what I thought you were leading to. How did the other 6 members react to that?
They're more accepting of it because once they realize, once they're captured and they get taken back to Ballinderry Castle, that they're cared for, they're protected. Yes, they are put to work, but everybody had a job to do back then. And they start to be integrated. And so they feel okay about that. And when she finally does talk to them that they will be, hand fasted, so they're hand fasted in a private ceremony, and then a few months later they're actually married in the church. That's the only way that Anne will be accepted, being that Duncan is Catholic, as is everybody in Ballinderry, and she is not. So that was the only way that they could accept her as being so-called the lady of the castle. But the rest of the McClearys, they're happy to finally have a home. They knew that they couldn't stay in the town where they were before, and they were tired of roaming the hills, and so they're accepting of what's going on between the two of them.
You just used a phrase that I'm dying of curiosity about. What is hand fasted?
Hand fasting is, I guess you might refer to it as a pagan ceremony, very similar to marriage. There's heartfelt words that are said, a ceremony around some candles, a tying together of the wrists, a slight exchange of blood between, thumbs, for instance, and the couple stays together for a year and a day. And if a child is conceived during that time, then generally it is considered a permanent relationship at that point. If not, after a year and a day that they decide they're going to go their separate ways, and that's what they do.
Oh my gosh, how fascinating. Is there going to be a sequel to Of Gifts and the Goddess?
I kind of allude to one in there with a couple of the other characters that are in there. Malcolm, who is Duncan's best friend, and Megan, who is Duncan's sister, because Anne does give Megan a vision that she sees, and that kind of alludes to some adventures that they're going to have. At this point, I don't have one planned, but you never know.
Okay, where can we find Of Gifts and the Goddess?
You can find it, it's listed on Amazon. It's also listed on my website, which is myjoyenterprises.com. And probably if you Google it, it'll come up on one of those two places.
Is there another book in your future?
Actually, I have two of them. There's one, it's called Dolphins and Desires, completely unrelated to this one. And that one will be coming out beginning of June. And then my third manuscript, I've just finished a couple weeks ago. That one is Of Stars and Secrets, and that one will be released in the fall.
Wow, for a lady that took so long to write the first one, you've been very productive since, haven't you?
Yeah.
Well, we are starting to run out of time. What is the one thing you would like our viewers to remember or be curious about when picking up the book?
It's a book that I would want them to not only be swept away to Ireland and enjoy the story, but also to think about all the different emotions that the characters go through. There's loss, there's triumph, there's some tragedy involved, all those human emotions that we experience. And also to take a look at the spirituality part of it, because that's the part that really, how does Anne being a pagan and Duncan being a Catholic able to meld together, being very tolerant of each other when so many of them that do follow each different path really aren't.
Michele, it's been a pleasure having you here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Linda Thompson, and you've been watching The Author Show, Of Gifts and the Goddess. This is going to be an interesting read for anyone who remembers, like I have been, to mystical, magical Ireland. You will love it because it sounds to me like there's a lot of really good stuff in here. So please join us next time, and remember, a book can change a life one word at a time.